We are live now, ma'am.
We are live?
Yeah.
Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you all for joining us today for another exciting discussion and a FICCI Tech Thought Leadership session on digital transformation during the pandemic. I really hope all of you are really keeping safe and your families are safe and you're following the vaccination drive and all the precautions which are required for during this pandemic time. We give you our best wishes for a safe health and please and thank you all for taking out the time during this time for joining us in this important discussion. I would also like to thank Mr. Nirvan Biswas, who is the Chief Technology Officer for National Bulkhead Corporation, for accepting our invitation and joining the session. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID pandemic has pushed organizations, be it MSME, MNC, startup, or a government department, over the technology tipping point and has transformed the business's ecosystem forever. It is clear that the current pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies over years, and many of these changes are here to stay. We have also witnessed that during this pandemic, consumers have also dramatically moved towards online channels, and companies and industry have responded in turn. There have been various applications, various services which have really transformed themselves into online for the benefit of the consumers. Digital adoption has taken a quantum leap at the organizational as well as the individual level. However, it is further estimated that with time, we will further enter into a new phase of a digital transformation. And the next phase of digital transformation will be further powered by the emerging technologies like AI, ML, 5G, IoT, and others. In fact, at present times, organizations who have undergone major transformation as they seek to strengthen resilience, increase agility, and deliver greater efficiencies during the challenging times. According to one of the very recent study, it is estimated that around 89.7% of businesses and IT leaders in the Asia Pacific say COVID has caused significant changes to their operational processes, while 91.8% say it has accelerated their digital transformation strategy. So let's be clear, every company knows how to pilot new digital initiatives in this new normal time, but very few do so at the scale and the speed suddenly required with a crisis like COVID. That's because in this normal time, the customer and market penalties for widespread test and learn can seem too high and the organization obstacles can be too steep. We have to understand this whole process of digital transformation journey of businesses. And with this aim, Vicky is organizing this session with our esteemed expert who is joining us today, who will share and guide us on the digital transformation during this pandemic. And we look forward to a really insightful session and discussion during today. I would also request for the audience, if there are any questions you feel which needs to be raised to the speaker, feel free to write during the discussion in the chat box. So if the time permits, we can take it with the speaker. Now I would request Mr. Nirvan Biswas, our esteemed speaker, to kindly take the discussion forward, share his thoughts, and let us know how we can take this journey of digital transformation with his own experiences. Over to you, Mr. Biswas, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarika. It's been a pleasure, on your platform to speak on this very important topic and a very kind introduction to the topic itself, I think, in my opinion. So, Sudhir, could you just put on the slide, Sudhir?
Yes, sir. Sir, can you please switch on your video?
Yeah. So as the slide is getting shown, you can possibly go to the next slide. Yeah. So what I have tried to do today evening is, take various examples of what is happening in various sectors per se. Now it could be manufacturing, it could be retail, it could be hospitality, or any sector that we talk about, and pick up examples of live use cases which have actually happened. So I'm not going to talk more on the theory aspect. It's going to be more practical so that it then gives a sense of the reality through which the various organizations are going through. Now, one of the fundamental things before we start, see, this digital transformation in various companies are happening at various stages. Okay, depending on the organization maturity per se. Now, some organization could be at a very nascent stage in terms of the transformation by itself, or some could be in the mid, and some could be in a very advanced stage. But what has the pandemic taught us? Okay, so one, the most important thing is there is a rapid change that was required during the pandemic. Now, how rapid or how urgent it was, it all depends on the organization at the level where it is and what is the transformation that took place. So, for example, I'll give you a good example. There has been a leading, travel company in the world. It's one of the, I think, the top four, where they had some 2,000 VPN users, okay, connected at the organization level. But during the pandemic, they realized that they now have to connect 20,000 employees onto the VPN in a matter of days. Now, what actually happened is they took 2.5 weeks to get it done so that the productivity level comes back to normal. But this is a good example where the organization at the level what it was and at the threshold of the technology that it has implemented, still it took 2.5 weeks for them to get to a level where it could then say that yes, we are now productive across the employee base. Similarly, you look at supply chain. Now, there are two parts to supply chain, right, during the pandemic. One, where you see the supply chain suddenly spiking in, especially in FMCG online companies, e-commerce companies, uh, and other retail online portals that are existing in India and elsewhere. And thirdly, on the other side, there were demand which was not seen at all. Okay, so there are two parallels which were happening during the pandemic. One was a spike, sudden spike. The second was the demand not there. Okay, and it was happening. So you take companies like Coke or you take companies like Pepsi, where the demand is just not there. Even today, the demand is much lower. But you look at biscuit companies or you look at the confectionery business of FMCG, you see a sudden spike which is happening on the online space, right? Now, from a system point of view, is the system or was the system in this organization or in whichever organization that we talk about, was it ready to get adapted to this kind of a disruption which was good? So nobody anticipated, number one. The system by itself did not anticipate. It was working at a certain on a certain algorithm at a certain level, at a certain supply demand aspect. So it could not understand that it also has to perform in this manner. Now, what happened as a result of that? Again, as I said, a rapid change. How rapid? So suddenly the companies had to change the algorithm, change the supply chain software, the configuration of it, and make it adaptable to the current scenario which was happening during the pandemic. Okay, so these are just couple of examples that I cited. So one, the first most important thing is rapid, yes, rapid change. How rapid? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves. And in different industries, wherever we are, I think the aim is to get to a level where we design software which are resilient, which are portable, which the which are easily adaptable, And the moment we start working and design systems like that, I'm sure whether pandemic or not pandemic, these systems could adapt to the various disruptions that are taking place. Now, you also, if you can also look at the online payment space. Okay, you look at the online transactions which are taking place in various data platforms. That has spiked, I think, 300, 400% upwards. Okay, now what has resulted in that? That has resulted in the disruption on the online payment portals that are existing at the moment. That has also resulted, by the way, and we should speak about it, that has also resulted in the number of online fraud that is taking place. Yeah. So there is a wide disruption which has happened because of the pandemic on the system front, on various sectors, online as well as physical. I think these are the two aspects one need to understand. So what I've done is I'll just quickly jump to the presentation to just highlight what are the various sectors and what are the various companies, what are they working on. So, for example, as I mentioned, so doctors have moved to online consultation. So e-pharmacies, NetMeds, Pharmeasy, these are the companies, online portals, verticals rather, who are doing exceedingly well. 1mg for that matter, and what so the sudden spike in online consumption, and because of various factors, of course. One is contactless delivery, the other is in terms of the consumption of the required data by itself. uh, that has tremendously increased, and this has not only increased in urban towns. uh, I am not talking of the metros only, but the tier 2, tier 3 cities, this has spiked tremendously. Okay, so and then you look at food companies, food delivery companies. Of course, the famous ones are the Zomato and Swiggy. Just look at the consumption which is happening over there. Uh, then I mean, OTT being one of the space where we are sitting at home and we are just consuming data after data. Not only OTT, I mean, look at the bandwidth behind the OTT. I mean, the amount of data consumption which is happening on various broadband has also prompted a lot of broadband companies to come forward and launch many other schemes. Yeah, so there is a spike in that as well. So there is a consumption which has increased in certain areas. There is a consumption which has also decreased in certain areas. So we look at both of them. And then, of course, I mean, there is a company called Hyundai, and we all know about it. It's one of the leading car manufacturer. So they have also launched various innovation online portal kind of thing where you can just go with a click of a button, book a car, make a payment, and the car is at home. Okay, and I'm sure you must have heard of super luxury car manufacturers like Jaguar. Uh, they similarly have launched a very similar portal very recently, I think a couple of weeks back, where you can now not only book a car, but you can take the financing aspect of it all through a click of a button. You don't have to go to the showroom, etc. On top of it, there is a 360 degree virtual car experience that the car manufacturer gives. So I don't really know why is there a need to go to the unless and until you want to sit in the car and experience. I'm sure there are a lot of people in that category. uh, and then HDFC, banks like HDFC, which have quickly revamped their digital offering. So you look at, I, okay, I have a HDFC card, and I'll be very candid. The number of offerings that have was there vis-a-vis the pandemic earlier and now has increased tremendously. I mean, any transaction that I do, I start getting in those messages. Either it comes through SMS, or there is a call that comes, or there is uh, 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 on the net banking portal, you can see a offering which is being made, etc. So all you see what's happening in various sectors. Yeah. So Sudhir, can you move on to the next slide, please? Thanks, Sudhir. So this is a case study where a bank like SBI and Hitachi, they came together, and how they realized that using SBI's proprietary banking technology, how can Hitachi sell innovations better than their normal way they were used to doing. Now, what happened was, uh, of course, you are aware of who Hitachi is. And now, what they did was they leveraged the private cloud technology and developed a data lake concept. Uh, okay, and this was SBI which primarily did it. But then just look at it now. How is cloud getting bigger out here? Now, as the pandemic rages on and there is a possibility of a so-called third wave, the number of users on a platform has increased tremendously. That's number one. But there are also not so many users on a certain system. Yeah. What does cloud offering, what does cloud give me benefit? It gives me pay per use, as simple as that, to put it in a common man language. So, which means that I pay for what I use. Now, if I use less, I pay less. If I use more, I pay more. But do I pay in proportion to the enterprise payment that I was used to doing when the system was in my data server or my data center rather? Now, in proportion to that, cloud makes a lot of sense. So therefore you see adoption to cloud suddenly increasing now. Because there is an adoption to cloud, there is a concept of IoT and blockchain also coming into view. I mean, just look at the simple concept of NFT, which is the non fungible tokens. Now, what has that done? It's a very simple concept. It's a concept where uh, a certain digital token is being made, and that digital token has X amount of content of X person, of Y person rather. Yeah. And nobody can change it. Now, how does it help? It helps in data privacy, etc. How did it help? And what is the adoption? You look at the adoption of the music industry over there. Okay, on the NFT side, what have they done? They have just democratized the process. Let people come record their album or their song or whatever it is, and put it up as a NFT. That's it. And then companies, different companies just take those and put it up on the portal, and somebody just downloads and listens. The moment they download and listen, the original person who has developed it gets paid. Of course, there is a mid payment which is made to the service provider, no doubt about that. But then everything happens so seamless, and this is what the pandemic is increasingly innovation on the digital side, not only transformation. I would add the word innovation is also making a huge difference in the way various sectors are performing. Yes, Sudhi, can you go to the next slide, please? Similarly, Hyundai and HDFC, again, as I mentioned, a click to buy online car buying platform. It's a single, just you click and it provides. So it's a very similar journey between what Hyundai did with SBI, but it's again an experience. Yes, Sudhir? Yes. So on the retail side, okay, now just look at various companies like Future, which was existing a little earlier. In fact, they have also done the recent marketing campaign of theirs online, and they have done quite well in spite of various factors not favoring them at the moment. But you look at other companies also, retail companies, they are doing exceedingly well in terms of the investment on the digital uh, uh, bit that they have been investing so far. Now, how has it paid off? Now, just imagine I have a okay, I am the CIO of a leading supermarket. Okay, now what are the avenues that I need to look at? I need to look at the supply chain, the software, the cost behind it, etc. And of course, there is a backend system, and there is a data warehouse and a data lake if possible, etc., etc. Now, how do I marry both the systems? How do I make it adaptable? How do I make sure that the inventory management is taking place seamlessly, especially during the pandemic? I think that is something that one needs to really think about. When we design software, again I go back to the original principle that I was talking about. Any system architecture, it has to be resilient, it has to be portable, it has to be adaptable, it has to be cost effective. Okay, now how we marry the systems, what framework we use, do we use open source or do we use Google, Amazon web services tools, etc. That is something that one needs to sit on the table and decide. But increasingly, uh, there is a strong belief in and most of the leading companies that I talk with, the CIOs in the group and elsewhere, there is a very solid footing which is now being talked about, that it is quite a good option for a build versus buy. Okay, now I don't want to pick on debate, because many companies have different priorities, different deadlines, etc., and everybody can decide. But if one needs to design a software and one needs to design a framework behind it, then a build option is much better. And then also, on top of it, to use certain tools of certain leading companies like Google, Amazon, etc., and design their own software from a build up, from a startup mode, makes a lot of sense. I mean, just look at, uh, just to give it a more enhanced feeling. Just look at what Aadhaar has done. I mean, you look at the Aadhaar framework; it is a complete build-up. Okay, so what Nandan did was a complete build-up from nothing, from zero, practically zero. In fact, I would say practically from the negative part to the positive part. Now, what framework has he used? He's used open source. He's used, of course, initially there was a bit of a non-open source also existing in the framework, but ultimately they switched on to the tools that they understand much better, which is the open source framework. And but how has it helped? Aadhaar is not only adaptable, it is resilient, it is portable, it can fit as an API into any of the systems and give you the data and the result that one needs. Okay, and how Aadhaar has helped during the pandemic. I mean, you look at Aadhaar registrations, you look at Aadhaar, for vaccinations today, the portals require Aadhaar number. Okay, for online payment, someone requires an Aadhaar number to post a payment from point A to point B. Either to an individual or to a bank, one needs the Aadhaar to get into the portal, etc. So such a such a thought-provoking framework, and simply developed. It's a very simple development in a sense. Of course, uh, there there is a lot of technology that has gone behind it. A lot of effort has gone behind it. A lot of thinking and mind and intelligence has gone behind it. But look at the output, how simple it is. So those are the things that has helped tremendously during the pandemic. And this is where I was trying to say that look at the technologies or look at the systems which have been developed and how those systems are today helping people in their common day-to-day life during the pandemic and elsewhere. Yeah. Yes, Sudhir. So these are the top trends. I mean, goes without saying. The foundational analytics, etc. From a this. So one of the other things that I was thinking about and which I thought I should speak about also, the consumer trends and where consumer trends and how it is, how the change and how the behavior is happening. So look at the online space, the online fashion space, the online food space, how the behavior has changed pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And where do you think the industry is going moving forward? I think, in my opinion, there is a strong shift in the consumer behavior per se. Okay, and this is going to stay. This is going to stay. So this is a permanent change which is happening. This is not something which has happened temporary and once we will, and if when we will come out of pandemic, this will cease to stay. I don't think so. I think lot of this consumer behavior change, working from home or online shopping, etc., is going to stay. No doubt about that. So, uh, of course, I mean, look at ourselves only. Work from home. I was telling Sarika some time back that work from home. I have also come out with another term, work for hours, and which is also WFH, by the way. So uh, there is no hour anymore. There is no 6.5, 7.5, 8 hours that we need to work. A call comes, and we need to get on the call. So the amount of work or the amount of productivity, in my opinion, has increased. The amount of monitoring uh, and the amount of the monitoring from a work perspective, I think even that is gradually happening. So we are again seeing a shift on the work front. We are seeing a shift on the consumer behavior and on the digital selling front as well. So how the goods are being sold digitally. I think there is a strong shift in how it was sold pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, this is going to stay. So this is not going anywhere. Yes, Sudhir. So yes. So a very important thing is during this time, how do you and what are the tools do you use to engage with your customers? Number one. Number two, the most important thing, how do you engage with your employees? I think, sometimes we forget uh, and we say that customer is the king. In my opinion, customer and employee, both are the king. Okay. And we should not differentiate between either one of them. Employee, if we forget, we won't be able to, get the required productivity or the required uh, engagement with them. And customer, of course, if we forget, then we forget the revenue. So this is on the business process side. Then building an intelligent cloud platform. I think, uh, as I mentioned earlier, there is an increasing, uh, adoption of cloud, which is happening, and you might have read, all of you, I'm sure, have read the amount of adoption on cloud that is happening. Uh, Selectively, one needs to look at how cloud is going to help you in the sector that you are. So if you are in the banking sector, you will still see a slow adoption to cloud, which is happening, but which is not happening at the at the rapid case in terms of the other sectors like retail or hospitality or any other sector for that matter, manufacturing as well. But when there is a very strong view on the tools that some of the cloud companies like Google, Amazon are now providing. And these tools today helps you build your system. Okay, so I of course can't take the name of the organization, but one of the leading companies today is building, and when I say leading, it's among the top two in the country uh, at the moment. So it's building its own ERP. Okay, just imagine it's not going in for a uh, uh, off-the-shelf ERP, which is residing. Normally, we see it on the Gartner quadrant. No, it is building its own ERP at a group level with a tie-up with Google. I think these are some of the defining moments which is happening in various sectors, and we need to pay some attention to it. Saying that just thinking about it, that why would a company of with so much of financial muscle would want to spend the number of hours and the number of the money behind recruiting people, architects, etc., in developing their own ERP, and that too uh, tying up with somebody like a Google Cloud, okay, or somebody like a Amazon cloud for that matter. So, but these are the defining moments which is happening, and the reason why is most of the cloud providers today are providing very intelligent tools that one can work with. So it's no longer a traditional bare metal server that somebody gives you and you are then left on your own. No, there are a lot of tools, a lot of frameworks, a lot of algorithms that the service providers, the Google, the cloud service providers are today providing, including so three companies notably are the Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, of course. And then creating more computing power. So that's on the hardware side. So what is happening with the hardware companies during pandemic? They are also simultaneously increasing the computing power, because uh, you know if just imagine if there is a spike on the supply demand side in supply chain software, then that much amount of proportionate computing power the server would require on the hardware side. So there is a shift which is happening on the hardware side as well. What I am saying. Yes, Sudhir. So as I mentioned, post COVID, there is a increased focus and a serious focus on utilizing technology across various levels in the organization, across various sectors of various organizations, and there is a strong boardroom push uh, from the board members as well, saying that yes, we would need to invest technology. So let's get our chief influencing officer, who I call the CIO, on board and quickly get into the nitty gritties of it and start working. So that's number one. Uh, Increased use of automation, no doubt about it. I think that was happening earlier as well, but this has just accelerated the whole effort. How quickly can I get the automation done, so that on the cost front I do not need to incur so much of physical space or physical people. At the same time, I get benefit of the automation that I get, and then employee and customer experience on the technology. So on the UI UX side, what kind of experience that an organization can provide, and what kind of engagement internally with my employees that I can have is something that a lot of companies have adopted a lot of software during this time. That I am talking on the HR side. And as I mentioned, with a lot of this, comes a lot of there is a greater responsibility, and because of the increased adoption of on the digital content and digital consumption and the digital investment, there is a lot of frauds which are also taking place. I'm sure you must have heard of the CETA server being breached and thereby the Air India database being opened, or the Domino's database being opened by the hacker. There is, I think, a serious thought which earlier was limited, in my opinion, to some of the sectors like banking, possibly supply on the FMCG side, a little bit, not much, but mainly on the banking side. I think that there is a sudden expansion of that thought across various sectors now. So it's not only limited to sectors which are highly sensitive about their own data. Yeah. Yes, Sudhir. So, so how? So basically, this slide just talks about, how do I what are the various digital aspects that I look at, what are the various customer experiences, as I mentioned in the earlier slide also, what are the digital operations, how do I build my team thereafter, what kind of compartments that I need to create in my organization. How do I need to proportionate them to the needs of the organization from time to time. I think this has taught a lot of lessons, and also with this, how to simplify the layer. Typically I'm sure all of you have read about a lot of case studies which are happening at the moment, even in uh, uh, traditional IT companies, native IT companies, that the layers today in the organization are simply getting narrowed down. Okay, so I'm saying no, much more than flat. Okay, it is just getting narrowed down, simplified, so that people can talk seamlessly, and decision and agility would be the key in this sort of a model per se. And of course, rethinking the business model, that goes without saying. During the pandemic, what kind of business model that I had to go through, how much of online adoption, how much of online marketing that I needed to, etc. So that is something where the organization needs to change. And then of course the buying behavior and the entire journey towards building a resilient system. Again, during pandemic or not during pandemic, but especially during pandemic, it has increased multifold. Yes, Sudhir. So I think this is the last one. As I mentioned, how organizations are moving towards cloud, how they are moving towards the SaaS based models, uh, how the digital uh, uh, you know uh, the transformation which is taking place proportionate to the recruitment that I need to do in getting that those journeys accelerated or those journeys worked upon. I think those shifts are taking place. What kind of skills that I would need, what kind of domain functionality that I would need, and what type of investment on the capex and of course on the opex side as well. I wouldn't leave that open. What kind of investment that a CIO needs to do at the moment. I think there is a deep thought which is happening, and one really needs to put some thought process on that front. Am I done, Sudhir? Yes. So would be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nirvan. It was really insightful. I could see the things coming up. Of course, the last slide you summed it well, the digital skills, digital labor, digital platforms, and of course, outcome linked as a service model. So yes, there are lots of questions which have been coming in from the audience. So for the benefit of the audience, we'll try to do justice. We'll take few questions, and I'm sure if there anything else which you feel needs to be carried or asked to the speaker, you can write to us because we obviously have to look into the interest of time as well. So, Niran, hope I'm audible to you.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, first, I'll take the first generic questions, and then there are various sector-specific questions which have flown in. So, I would say that the first question talks about what's an impact on COVID-19 has caused on the investment decision on digital transformation. You did cover the role of the CTO, CIOs being part of the discussions and investments being done by the companies. But if you want to elaborate furthermore on this point.
So, if I understand the question right, what kind of investment would be required, especially during this times?
Yeah, and basically they are saying what this COVID-19 has caused an impact on the digital transformation in terms of investment decision.
Yeah. So you know, I think okay, in a slightly humorous way, I would say that CFOs are now giving more attention to the CIOs, uh, and, and not only CFOs but the CEOs as well.
See,
So the area of influence of the CIO today, Sarika, has increased multifold, especially during the pandemic. And today the CEO is looking at the CIO not only at the kind of investment that needs to be made, but the recommendation are being taken very seriously. So when a CIO enters the boardroom today and says that this is the kind of software we would require from a security perspective, this is the kind of firewall or this is the kind of three-tier firewall, etc., that we would require in our organization, everybody sits up and takes note. So I think the area of influence has increased, and therefore I would point out that uh, recommend and go with the recommendation of the CIO. Let the CIO take some bold decisions. Some may go wrong, some may go right, but most often they do take the right decision. But back it up, and the backing is now taken. So that's what I see predominantly.
sure. So CIOs become important, and please give heed to their advices. Then they've talked about with you. We mentioned about the emerging technology. So they are saying how crucial a role AI will play in digital transformation during the pandemic. And there's also another question which I'll club it with here. They're talking. The other question talks about how emerging technologies like AI are helping organizations in enhancing their cybersecurity framework, especially during COVID. So
Sure.
basically, role of emerging technologies right now and also related to the cybersecurity.
Sure. So, AI is a topic that it's one of the topics that I'm really passionate about. You just reverse the word AI. Uh, it's then called IA. Okay, and IA plays a very fundamental, important role in organization. Now, what is IA? Information architecture. What is information architecture? The various data ports of the various data systems that is flowing in the organization from point A to point B to point C and maybe back to point A. Now, if my data architecture, if my information architecture is very robust, right, and I have systems that are backing them up, then on top of it, I could place a data lake, I could write algorithms, I could, then come with use cases that matter to the business. Of course, it should matter to the business, more important. I should not be writing my own use case and then telling the CEO that this is what we should do. But, just think of a use case on the retail side. The number of footfalls that I could predict, looking at the current trend of the footfalls by analyzing the CCTV images. Okay, now what is that going to do? That is going to give me a trend in terms of what kind of revenue do I expect uh, during a particular day, during the week, during a month, and thereby what should be the kind of inventory that I should plan depending on what is getting sold, etc. So, but behind, yes, it's a very interesting use case. But behind this, if I have a robust information architecture, I think it's then makes sense to go to the next level, which is uh, writing or deploying a AI system on top of it.
So AI to IA and then the deployment of the system and which can enable the thing. So yes, it helps in the decision making. It gives you, I would say, the inside information which you require for making the various decisions. That's something which is very important. So yes, audience, the emerging technology, especially AI, would going to be playing a huge role in this. I mean, again, I'm saying there are a lot many questions. I'll now just shift to a few sector-specific questions, and I'll apologize to the audience that because we just have 7 minutes left, so we'll not be able to cover up all the questions. However, the next question, which will take it up, there have been a sector-specific question from the food processing industry. They've talked about, kindly throw some light on the food processing industry with respect to digital transformation. Also, there has been a similar demand from the retail and the commerce industry who's talking about how can they benefit from digital technology, especially when this pandemic gets over. So maybe you can take up these three things. I mean, food processing and retail and commerce, and there are others also. So maybe you'd like to throw some specific light on these three sectors right now.
Sure. So I'll start with the on the retail side. See, on the retail side, uh, uh, there are various tools and there is various framework which is already available with some leading cloud companies like Google and Amazon, especially. Little bit on the Microsoft side, I haven't seen so much of development of retail per se on that platform, but it's happening. Uh, so one can look at how the adoption of the cloud could help the sectors like retail and commerce also, because there is a lot of data which is getting generated on a daily basis. And how do I store the data? What kind of analysis that I do with it? What kind of tools that I need to use? Uh, I, I think it makes absolute sense that if the sectors haven't invested in on the tools at the moment, they should start exploring it, looking at it very seriously, and start porting the data that they have, rather than storing it in their in-house systems on the data center side. That's number one. Number two, commerce you mentioned, right, Sarika?
Yeah.
Yeah. So commerce on the again on the commerce side, what kind of yeah, sorry, I think there was some noise. So on the commerce side, what kind of transactions are we looking at? What is the commerce? What is that organization on the commerce side? Focusing on. It all depends on that. But I will give a generic view. I think again on the commerce side, because it involves a lot of data. What kind of analysis that I could do with the data? What kind of ERP solution that I can come up with? Again, on the ERP side, which is very common to both retail as well as on the commerce, what kind of ERP one needs to invest on? Do I have my current ERP? Uh, the ERP that is adaptable, resilient, portable, on mobile, cost effective, etc., etc. So these are the questions one needs to ask. And the moment you get those answers, you then look at various systems which are there in the market, and then start either doing a tie up with some of the companies like Google, because some of the leading retail companies, look at what Tesco has done worldwide, or you could look at any other. Most of the retail chains abroad have either tied up or they have bought some of the solutions that the cloud providers are providing. So I think it's happening in India as well, in our country as well, and a lot of these technologies are getting adopted. So again, one needs to write on the left hand side of the paper and on the right hand side the answer, and below hand the summary as to what the action point should be.
Sure. And the food processing industry.
Yeah. Sure. So food processing, I think, You look at somebody like Nestle, okay, and may not be a correct example, but it's there. Now, look at some of the solutions that Nestle has implemented, especially during pandemic. Uh, their entire supply chain software, or and I mean, a company of the size of Nestle, of course, has an enterprise software, uh, enterprise grade software, as we mentioned. Right? So this software, they had to quickly adopt, change the configuration, and build it because there was a sudden spike in some of the goods that they were selling. Now, and at the same time, there was a sudden decline in some of the goods that they were selling as well. So Maggie is one example. Maggie as a product was getting sold enormously during the pandemic. Okay, a lot. I mean, a multifold consumption was happening across various households. I'm sure we are all aware of it. But at the same time, a product of Nestle wasn't. I think, if I remember properly, it was a biscuit, or I don't remember exactly. But the consumption fell drastically. Okay, now what happened because of that? The supply chain software could not handle the spike and could not handle the sudden decline. Okay, and it was a very uh, radical decline and a radical increase, which had happened in a matter of days. Okay, now they suddenly had to go back to the drawing board, change the configuration, then come out with it so that they could adopt in the market. Now those are the things that one needs to think when they're designing, or when they have their own software, in the food processing or any other industry for that matter. What are the design principles that I need to work on? And these are these are technical things. I do understand, but it needs to be thought through, it needs to be written, it needs to be tested across various scenarios that you wouldn't possibly imagine at the moment. Okay, so the testing part, the quality part, etc., one needs to focus on that as well. And what are the kind of scenarios that one can write? So therefore there is also a greater emphasis on getting the right skills, getting the right people on board, getting the right people who can think of this kind of scenarios and who can help the organization move forward.
Yeah, so basically saying that, of course, be prepared with the technology to handling something which is not normal. There could be spikes, there will be something. So, of course, we need the right digital skills people, the people who could handle those kind of analysis, and be prepared for some kind of situations like you talked about, spike in the demand or spike in the supply, and all those the analysis of the situation, and then coming to a conclusion. So, the companies needs to be prepared for something which they have not actually thought about it, because this kind of situations have come up with some unusual circumstances which needs to be dealt up with it. So yes, that's a message which goes on from your side. I'll end up a question with the last thing, which is that what do you see after when this dust settles in? I mean, when this whole thing is over, how do you see the technology industry doing it post pandemic, or how the organizations going forward in the area of adoption of technology? Because we've seen the spike which has happened in the digital transformation process when this pandemic is on. Right? How do you see it going forward? What is the journey? Do you see it, say, next 2 to 5 years from now? I mean, once the pandemic is actually not there.
So I see a greater engagement between the organizations and the IT vendor, so as to speak. Uh, Greater engagement, and I see a greater role that the vendors will play from now on, not only engaging with various organizations, but also uh, creating future ready systems and hardware. Okay, both on the system side as well as on the hardware side, on the application side and the hardware side. So I see a greater role being played by this. So greater synergy, greater mix, and increased spending on the. So one is a great deal of effort and a great deal of research being done on the vendor side, a great deal of engagement, a great deal of question answer session happening between the vendor and the organization and the organization spending board. So that's one aspect. The second I see moving forward is greater need of the skilled people, the right skilled people in the organization. So there is going to be a shift in how the recruitment is being done, or rather, what kind of structure would I need in the organization? Would I need a simple engineer who would come and do write a code base in on a Microsoft or on a Java language, or do I need a ML engineer at the moment? Okay, depending. So it also depends on where the organization is, what stage the organization is at in terms of maturity. I think that will propel the the skilling aspect on the digital side. That's number two. And number three, a very serious view on the OPEX and CAPEX, especially of how it's being designed, and a greater engagement in the organization per se between the CEO, the CFO, and the CIO. The area of influence is now going to increase dramatically. So these are the three aspects that I see moving forward.
Thank you, Nirvan. I think it was really nice. I mean, we could see that this is something, the journey for this has already started, which we have talked about. We've seen how the organizations are really gearing up and, in fact, are adopting to this change because of the need which is there. And we, like you said, it's going to get amplified further in future with a couple of things going to stay forever. And definitely, you've mentioned the key pointers, which is in the last 3 points, which is definitely going to be part of the technology journey of the organizations post-pandemic as well. So with these words, we would like to thank you for sparing your time and sharing your thoughts with us and the audience which has joined us today. It was really nice to hear and learn about the digital transformation process and the journey, which is the organizations, the key areas which the organizations are focusing on, which needs to be taken care of when this process needs to be adopted, especially which is, I would say, caused by this pandemic, which everybody is now really giving a high focus on the digital transformation process. So thank you for joining in here. Thank you for sparing time, and thank you, audience, for being supportive and very live with the questions which you have been asking us. We understand that due to the interest of the time, we could not cover all the questions. I mean, to be honest, Evan, I was having a list of more than 15 questions which has come to you, but I could only do justice to 7 to 8 by clubbing a few together. So maybe for others whom you still feel anything needs to be asked further from Nirvan, please write to us on ficky.ict@ficky.com, and we'll be happy to take those questions further with Nirvan and get back to you. And also for the audience, please get back to us if there's any feedback you want us for the session, or in general, if you want us to take it forward in the future in our other thought leadership sessions. We promise to you that we come back to you again next week with some other delightful session and a discussion topic, which we as FICCI, a part of thought leadership sessions, keep on doing it on the technology. So with these words, I thank Nirvan, the team who's worked with this from the FICCI side for developing this session, and the audience who have joined in. Please stay safe and take care. And we look forward to interact soon in the next session. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.